Hey, welcome to the Tap In Podcast. I'm your host, Will Ross. Before we get started today, I'd like to introduce my guest a little bit. Jag Wired Art is an amazing painter based out of San Antonio, Texas. And in this episode, we talk a little bit about the natural proclivities that people have for creating art and sharing. I hope that we can look into this person's art. If you haven't already followed their social media pages, you're missing out. It's some of the best visionary art I've seen in the Central Texas region, and I really recommend you go peep some of her work. She's got tons of art for sale constantly in a variety of price ranges, and you're not gonna miss out anymore, I hope. I'd like to bring up my sponsor for the podcast, the gallery Lucid. Still going strong with the art shows. And now I believe Rosemary Allen has joined the team with therapeutic massage. And that's just really cool because now there's an entire team of people working on healing anybody who's down to work with them. I'm really excited to announce that the show with Elliot Rogers went really well, and my debut show of Fyoog was super awesome, and I really appreciate everybody who came out to that show and everybody who's listened to this podcast by relation. It just is amazing to me that people should sign in and listen to this podcast, and I hope that it has helped y'all as much as it's helped me to reflect on a lot of the ideas that exist within our community here in Austin, Texas. And I hope to soon bring the podcast out of this local area and start interviewing people from all over the country, not just Austin. Because consciousness isn't vocal, it's not localized anywhere, right? It's spread all over the world. And it's the people all over the world that share the fire of communication and appreciation that keeps the inspiration for these kinds of projects alive. And if you're one of those people, I just commend you so much for hanging in there. And I hope that we can continue to listen and help one another through this era and the situation that is human life on Earth in 2019. So whatever you're doing right now, whether it's cleaning your room or doing the dishes or going on a long drive somewhere, maybe you're just chilling on the couch in your underwear eating hot Cheetos or switching back and forth between Wheat Thins and hot Cheetos. Maybe you're trying to quit eating hot Cheetos. Wheat Thins might be the way to go. But I can't tell you how to eat or how to live your life. I just thank you so much for listening to this podcast. And with that in mind, I'm going to turn it over to the interview with Jag Wired.
Later, but today on my podcast, my guest is Jag Wired. Thank you for meeting me. In the past, I've actually asked you what your name is, and you were like, it's Jag Wired. So, do you mind me asking what that's about, more or less?
So Jag Wired actually came from this reoccurring dream I used to have as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
The jaguar, I feel, is my spirit animal, like my guide in life. When I was a kid, though, it used to terrify me because I used to have this recurring dream about this big cat, but I wasn't sure what it was. And the last time I dreamt about it as a kid, it pounced at me, jumped at me, so it terrified the crap out of me. Years later, I had gone through this whole stint where I hadn't done any artwork. And I got to meet another visionary artist. His name's Andrew Gonzalez.
Okay.
He's from San Antonio. He's taught at the Visionary Art School in Vienna.
Really?
And I just happened to meet him at an art show. And he encouraged me to keep creating work. And that night I started dreaming about the jaguar again. And so I take it as my totem, my animal.
Yeah.
And I learned in middle school what it was, which is like middle school history class, that it was a jaguar instead of a leopard. But it's been something that's guided me and reminded me. The jaguar is very much a symbol of touching on both planes of reality, the physical and the non-physical.
Yes.
So it's like traverses different dimensions, basically.
Yeah, jungle cats in general they're very symbolic throughout most cultures. You know, they're very, animalistic, but also very passionate symbol as well. So not necessarily relating to like the how do I say this? Like the fact that they kill a lot of stuff, but that brings into the balance of it all the fact that it's not just one way or another out there, is it?
Yeah, like in like Aztec and Mayan cultures, the jaguar is also a symbol of transformation.
Mm-hmm.
So they would say that they transformed into this animal, and the power of its bite is significant of its strength in the spiritual sense. But yeah, cats are a big symbology of just, especially for jaguars, because they are so low to the ground, and they're actually the only big cat that likes water. Apparently.
Really?
So they have they're very close to symbology of water, and so they're also symbology of night, and night of course has the spiritual context alongside of it. Snakes are also a big thing found in every single culture all over the world.
Yeah, and you know that collab from 2 years ago, it's kind of like a cat turning into a snake or something.
Yeah.
Interesting. I like what you're saying about how there's multiple sides to your character, if I may. You know, there's like the dream side that, you know, is a personal thing that you experience, but then there's like, you know, this side of you, the person, and how it all comes in together, not unlike, if I may, a shaman who's recognizing the other side. You know, some people I find might not see the clear line between like dreaming or the imagination and how that can be used in one's life for not only healing the self, but maybe holding space for other people. And so I'd like to ask, like, when you create your art, does the symbolism come to you as like a combination of both your waking experience and maybe your dream experiences as well? Like, how do you decide? Because it's all very fused. You know what I mean? It's like human forms fused with very mystical situations. You know what I mean? And so to me, can I ask you a little bit more about how you feel like that fusion of ideas has benefited your life or the environment around your life?
So I've always been kind of attracted to nature.
Yeah.
Just I find that once you're in it, it's like it runs to your frequency. Like it's almost like reconnecting to something that we're supposed to be running on, right? That frequency we're supposed to be running on. And in nature, you can find these amazing things and these amazing sights that are related to us as well. Like each tree has its own kind of signature, basically. Even though all of nature, including us, runs on this this mathematical equation. It's
Have you heard of The Algorithm? It's a band. It's a band called The Algorithm. Have you heard of it? It's like how can I say? It's like a psytrance fused with heavy metal almost.
Interesting.
Yeah, I just had to say that. But the algorithm you're talking about, it's there. It's not unlike the code in the Matrix or something like that, right?
Yeah, it's like there's sacred geometry and golden ratio, which is apparently the mathematical equation for all life. Everything in life follows that pattern.
Yes.
And it's also found in every culture, every indigenous culture throughout the entire world. They all have the symbol of this spiral, which is also this, it's also supposed to symbolize the beginning and end, and everything in between is the life journey.
Spiral.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting place. Would you say you're spiraling up or down?
Why can't you do both?
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Because I haven't thought of it. I'm just kidding.
I think you can do both, because honestly, both positive and negative are a part of us. It's a part of everything that we see in life. you can't have the good without the bad, and you can't have light without the dark. And it's much, I got the light into dark reference very much so most recently, like the series that I had been working on the past year, on and off. That one was from an experience of being just in complete darkness, doing the float session.
And this is the sensory deprivation,
Yeah,
right? Okay,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah, basically you float in darkness, it's pitch black, the water is set to your body temperature, and it's buoyant. It makes you buoyant because there's so much salt content. It's like 50-50 salt and water, I think.
Yeah, it takes some getting used to.
Yeah, and it's definitely like the first 15 minutes I'm like, you know, every thought during the day and during the week had like run through the course of my mind. But I have experience with meditation, so it didn't take me too long to pull from that and just kind of become one with the darkness. And in it, there was just plethora of beautiful colors, and I saw the galaxy and these whales pushing me along this beautiful universe.
And you've made a painting for that experience, right?
I made a small piece. It was a gift to Float San Antonio. They had given me that experience.
Yeah.
And so it was a gift to them because the entire time it was like my third eye was activated. So I felt like this pressure there.
Yeah, yeah.
And it was a reminder that, you know, how powerful that part of us is.
Fascinating. It's not unlike one of my first very... I wish there was an adjective to describe like a pineal gland experience, but it does feel like there's a pressure there, you know, or for me it is like a protrusion of sorts, like I'm a unicorn or something. If you feel your head that much, but I haven't had that experience in a long time. But when I look at your art, I go back into that space. And so that's why I really wanted you on the podcast, is because I relate to your art so much, pardon me.
No problem.
So how many, like just a rough guess, how many times have you floated? Or I guess a more interesting question is how many hours have you floated?
Well, that one was just an hour. I don't even think it was really an hour. Because there's the whole, like, you basically get this massage, so it relaxes your body. So which is, I think, is very important. It relaxes your body and your mind. For me, it took me only an hour to get my visual experience from it. I know other people who've had like 2 or 3 hours of floating and they don't get any visuals whatsoever. So it's not like it's going to give you this visual experience. I think as an artist it did, because that's how my mind works. But I know that people who are more analytical get more of a calming experience with it. It's very detoxifying.
Yes.
For me, it was an hour that got me to that experience. And it really was interesting to tap in naturally to how the brain works, you know.
Yes, that's actually a wonderful pivot to what I was thinking just then, is how, like, right now we're sitting next to this Lucia light machine, which is a hypnagogic light therapy machine.
Yeah, that's it.
So I'm thinking, what if you could combine these technologies together? And because right now in society, psychedelics are taboo. Like, maybe not in all circles, but I know that they're not taken quite as seriously because they're illegal. But these are options for people to tap into their creativity outside of a dangerous scenario that might involve, talking to a stranger. Buying drugs from strangers is never safe.
I think to get onto that topic, I actually did a hosting for a film release. It was called From Shock to Awe. And the film was about combat veterans with PTSD who took ayahuasca for the first time for healing for their PTSD. And what's happening is that there's a lot of major changes happening, especially in the especially when it comes to PTSD research, using psychedelics for health, especially for healthy minds. MAPS is the Multidisciplinary Associates of Psychedelic Studies.
Got it.
And they were formed in 1986, and they've had so much progress just in this past, 10 years, 18.
You're right.
2006, they've gotten a lot of push to be allowed to do the things that they're doing. Which
There's
is
a meetup
amazing.
in town for them, actually.
Yeah, it's incredible because there's certain places that are more lenient, of course. Like Colorado has, there's stuff that I'm finding out that they're doing there that nobody else is doing, and that they're pushing for the world to understand what's going on.
And that makes me feel really good, actually.
Yeah.
I kind of feel a stress relief at that point. And I really support the MAPS people.
Yeah.
Dennis McKenna and his brother Terrence were great advocates for these kinds of studies for the longest time, and I think it's just great that Dennis is the older brother of the two, is actually alive to see that it's slowly happening.
Yeah, I think what's really helping is the fact that they're treating PTSD, which a lot of the people in the studies are combat veterans, and a lot of people support the troops, whatever side they are, red, blue, purple, green, it doesn't matter.
Purple.
Whatever side they feel that they need to be on supports these people, right? Because they're making major sacrifices, and they're seeing things that we don't see on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Because we're so desensitized from violence, but they go to violence and see violence, right? And for them to come back and have this pain, this guilt and pain and everything else just put onto them, and they have to deal with it themselves. And they can't even live a normal semblance of a life. It's that's very difficult. And to see that a lot of people are supporting them, being able to do these alternative routes, which have been around for a millennia. They've been around since the grass started growing, right?
Yeah.
But they are the reason why there's so much more positive influences to what they're doing with psychedelics as opposed to, medication in pill form.
Yeah. My personal history of medication is something that's worth sharing. I was diagnosed with, ADHD, just like a bunch of people, but from a very young age. And, the solution was amphetamines twice a day, indefinitely, and that as a child was just depressing. I kind of felt broken as a person.
I had some teeth pulled, wisdom teeth, and they gave me Vicodin.
Yeah.
And it just made me really depressed. I did not, I was like, I'm not going to take it anymore.
Well, I told you I was in rehab in San Antonio.
Yeah.
What had happened was I had this burn on my arm, and so they gave me just Percocets and Dilaudid. Dilaudids just 2 rungs under fentanyl. It used to be the second strongest, and then the one above that was something called oxymorphone, which it sounds redundant, right?
Yeah.
Well, pretty much oxymorphone, I mean, that's incomprehensible amounts of opiates, but I remember I was just so bogged down in,
Kind of leaves you cloudy. Your mind's really clouded.
Oh yeah, and I mean, I was like, man, my relationship destroyed itself. Oh man, I'm so glad me and that person are okay, because I was just so fucked up. I didn't even realize it until afterwards. I was totally destitute. That it didn't help me at all. And then I remember the doctor asked me if I wanted more. He was like, "Do you want some more pain pills?" And I was like, no. Luckily, I knew to say no. But I could see why the accessibility of it all makes it more available. I mean, yeah, that makes sense, but it just makes it more available to become dependent on these substances. Where I think there's a substance that's very light, that's within everybody, that's called your creative imagination. And that substance can be more than any pill, it can be the ultimate extended release, comforting thing. But to do that, it does take a lot of, there's a lot of different ways to heal oneself, you know?
There's so much information out there now, and there's so many different ways, and that's a good thing because one thing may not work for the next person. You know what I mean? We're all collectively the same, but we don't grow up the same way. We weren't raised the same way. So we have to have these options for people to be able to find some semblance of normalcy, whatever normal is, but to give them some kind of semblance of being whatever they want to be, I guess. Because the mind is very powerful. And a lot of the autoimmune diseases start from within the mind, so it's within the brain. So it's kind of an interesting thing to think about.
Absolutely. I mean, disease in general is, I think that concept could be elaborated upon more within myself at times, because sometimes I don't see someone who might be struggling or suffering through depression, which is a disease, or anxiety, which is also classified as a disease at this point, and one can oftentimes feed into the other. But does our, this is a weird conversation already, but it's cool. Does our identification?
I don't think there's anything such as a weird conversation. There's only conversation.
Oh, all right. Bless you. You're so right. What would I do without other people in my life? I'd just be yammering into a microphone alone. That's what I'd be doing. But I gotta say that the way we perceive our own disease ultimately affects our condition more than the condition itself sometimes. Is that what you're kind of getting at? How, like, if there's a disease within the mind, maybe the cure is in the mind too?
Well, there's a lot of studies that have been conducted on autoimmune diseases, and they're linked to brain activity, but not necessarily you can control what's going on with you, because it's something that's either genetic or
I see what you're saying.
You know what I mean? So it's not necessarily you could be like, oh, I have like, for instance, lupus is an autoimmune disorder that starts from the brain, or they found links within the brain, and there's a lot of people who found CBD and THC to help counter a lot of the symptoms of that. It basically starts to break down every part of the body, so it can all the major organs can be affected by lupus. And so what they found, a lot of people who have lupus have been just kind of experimenting on their own with CBD and THC.
Self-medicating is very popular today.
Yeah, well, it's because there's a lot of new knowledge isn't being accepted into the medical field, because there's still the illegal classification.
Yes.
Because they're still classified as illegal substances, even though we're making strides. There's still a lot to go, because it had negative connotations from our past. People who were used to being in like either at stay-at-home moms or door-to-door salesmen, kind of like that time frame. I don't know, what was that, like 50s or so? But then when they started to like break from that mold, I think they broke from it so excessively, because they're like, there's a bit of new freedom that they had never experienced before. So with that, it also comes the ignorance and abuse of things. Like the term psychedelic itself, like, is looked at negatively.
It's got the word psycho in it.
Yeah, well, it's right. The definition of it is just mind awakening, mind altering. Like, it's mind manifesting.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's, if you look at it instead of the negative connotations to it, there's so much benefit, and the mind is very powerful. It has the ability to cripple you.
Having a crippled mind, it's something I relate to, because I have anxiety that has left me what feels emotionally crippled from being able to deal with my issues on an emotional level. And that especially when I'm trying to be a professional artist, it feels like I don't have time for that.
It's also like trapping. You like if I do this and this could happen to me. I know it's like, I used to have really bad anxiety, like really, really bad, to where I was like, I'm not going to do that because this negative thing's going to happen to me. I either break my leg or break my arm or something, and it's just something that really I shouldn't be afraid of doing. And throughout the years, like, I've gotten better at, if there's something new, I'm going to try it at least one time, because, you know, this life is very unpredictable. So.
Yes, the chaotic nature of life is what has instigated me, literally, into creating art and music. It feels that way, and just because my history is one that has been consumed with isolation for the most part, but part of my journey as a person is, and this is why I started a podcast in a sense, is because being an introverted person, I can be very extroverted in this sense, because I'll share this with people, and hopefully the world will receive me gracefully, you understand. But the reality of it is that for me, anxiety is something I deal with every day, but how I deal with it seems to be the fun game that is what makes it worth it. And by it being worth it, I mean like the grind of making art. And you paint a lot.
Oh yeah.
Like, so someone who is on that art, create that, I mean, you're on like a wave of real creativity. I hope you don't mind me saying.
Oh no.
And it's wonderful and beautiful, let me say.
Thank you.
It stands out a lot, and it makes me really want to take a lot of interest in San Antonio art, because
we have an amazing group of artists, and there's more artists still like coming out of the woodwork, you know. And we're when I started Art of Consciousness with my friend Jose, we were geared towards, you know, people with visionary art or mind awakening, mind consciousness stuff. You know, like, there's an awakening, it's just we didn't have a home. So we were basically trying to create a place where we could all gather and get together, along with our spiritual community and our meditation community and our yoga community, like just bringing all those together.
Okay, so this is like you created a gathering that, what was the name of it again?
It's called Art of Consciousness.
Art of Consciousness.
So we have a big get-together once a year. We'll be on our third year coming up. We've done a mini show this past second Saturday in November. And our goal was to show that there's more to Texas than this, like,
in Texas.
than what, you know, you know, a lot of people when they come here, they see this negative outlook on us down here, but we are aware, you know, there's a lot of awareness.
Yes.
And it's to also create a space, especially within San Antonio, to show that there is more art out there besides just pop culture art. And horror art, horror art, yeah. That culture is very popular down there. Horror
really?
Movies and
Man, I watched the new Halloween movie on my birthday, and like, I mean, I'm an experienced horror movie watcher, so I know when the music starts gearing up, I just close my eyes and don't see the gore, but Kara, bless her heart, she watches it, and there's some bad stuff in that movie, man, like just real brutal violence, and it's like, I laugh at it because it's corny to me, but at like a real down-to-earth level, it's just like,
see, I like
horrible.
I really love like old school scary stuff, like, you know, One Step Beyond, which was this old black and white show. I really highly recommend it. It's very well thought out scripts. There's one episode actually that was basically a documentary, so it went completely off their regular programming, but they went to the Amazon and they had filmed a curandera, or a shaman. They filmed a shaman doing a ceremony. So there was a lady, I don't know if she's a psychologist or a scientist, but there was several scientists, and she was one of the ones that they were communicating with. And apparently this whole she was the shaman was able to tell them like things that they never even told the shaman during this whole experience. And it was just it's really crazy that they they advocated for it in that time frame. They were even showing like is there psychic abilities with this, and but all their other shows, all the other episodes for One Step Beyond were all like scripted episodes. That was the only one that was like off script. It was really interesting.
Oh man, the world is so weird, and to be honest, I have an opinion about psychic telepathy and stuff, and it all really ties back in to what we were talking about in the beginning about how nature is a frequency of something that can be latched into, and I think that the psychic ability that anybody could boast is not like a superhuman exception on like a genetic level, but more about just tapping into nature, you know, the force of nature. You know, there's people who, like Michelangelo, who seem like forces of nature. And it's because that entity was more or less just the name under like teams of people who were helping create this one person's vision, but that genius or the genius that came through the scene of Romantic Italy, I guess. Renaissance Italy, that's what I meant. Yeah. Is what I think it's what compels people to experience things that seem like telepathic coincidences or synchronicities, and it's hard to really put those into words because they really do exist on like this ephemeral magic plane that it might not even need to be spoken of to be truly appreciated.
Well, Carl Jung, he is the one that came up with the term visionary, a visionary artist.
Really?
And he said that an artist is just a tool, or we are just the tool for the creative consciousness to manifest itself. And so we don't choose what we paint, basically.
Yeah.
The consciousness does it, and it used to be, I used to not be able to paint consistently like I do now, because I would always second guess the next step.
Really?
But when I allowed myself to just let the paint do its thing and create with, you know, just letting myself go in the process, it makes it more seamless, and I create things that I don't even realize that I'm
It's more natural,
on.
right?
Yeah, it's very organic, yeah.
Eric, how much time do we have left?
We got it.
Oh, cool. Well, I'm glad you're here, man. I just wanted to check.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
That's cool. You know, I didn't even really need to be pausing it, but
Thank you for,
yeah,
thank you.
I need to dive back into the podcast, but I like it when there's other people around. I might not even edit this out. Who knows?
Had multiple.
Yeah, I should have asked him to stay. Jeez. Oh well. Well, hey,
Get his feedback on things.
next time anybody listening walks in on the podcast, just sit down and listen, I guess.
Yeah, they might be able to add some insight that we didn't even think about.
You know what? We just plateaued at a really interesting valley into this idea of, you know, one's nature and what the nature of that nature is. That might be what this podcast is about, is how the identity we form within nature it's of nature, but not necessarily totally nature, because there's a part of ourselves that, and I've talked about this with Greg Pettit, and we might disagree on this, about how the side of every person that is the imagination, I think it is on another side of a membrane. You see, it might be considered to be some sort of like ignatiure, where it's like this, you know, it's a very private, personal thing that unless you're a visionary artist, you know, a lot of people are only second guessing what you're thinking, for the most part. I mean, you know, unless you're totally a psychic shaman like you were talking about. But what do you think about that? Do you think that the imagination is a part of nature, or is there some sort of veil in between the nature and the imagination? What's your opinion on this?
Well, I when I paint, I like to listen to a lot of documentaries or like a lot of TED Talks along when I'm painting, especially when it's a subject that I'm interested in, and the mind is one of them, especially when it comes to visions and dreaming. The pineal gland actually is where a lot of our dreams and our visions and our any of the paintings I feel come from. It also produces DMT, and it's within us, and it's within every living creature that lives on this planet. So we're very connected to nature. We are nature. We're
Yes.
made of like everything that nature is made of, we are made of as well. I think we always constantly try to separate ourselves, but if you go out like to a park, especially when you go hiking and getting lost within nature, you can see how much that you just become part of it instead of, especially if you allow yourself to become part of it, because if you try to influence it, it tends to like fight back in its way, like it doesn't accept, like you don't get accepted.
You're right. You're right. You don't get the job.
Yeah. So like I tend to, for my paintings, I get a lot of referencing from my treks in the woods. I'm working on this series called my Animal Totem series, and I took all the models out on a hike with me. They were all like individual hikes, but I got to know them to be able to paint them underneath these animals that they've connected to, not what I've connected to them. It's all the animals that connect to them. And so being out in nature, connecting with another person made of nature, out in nature and exploring what it has, what it holds. Because every time I went out with the same park, every time I went out, there was something new to be seen. And it was the same area. So like it wasn't anything different. The area wasn't different, but every time I went, it was a different experience.
Yeah, this reminds me of this strange thought I got from when I was watching a documentary on Italian gardens, and how like cardinals would just, they were in a competition with one another to have the prettiest garden, and it's like they said that they would literally sap all the cities of their resources and water to create these like extremely over-the-top water gardens that were all, not unlike hoarding. But I had this thought, like if everybody had their own palace, eventually our palaces would just grow into one another, and we just have the palace, right? And so that's kind of like what nature is, right?
I guess in a way, because I mean, the way that we have our cities right now are basically like a little colony, right?
Yeah.
we just build our colony a little different. Instead of being so in tune with what's around us, we're building on top of what's around us, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And not like taking into consideration what is there, you know what I mean? So there's like a lot of growth without taking into consideration what that growth could do to us eventually.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I really like some of the architectural ideas that are coming out that are like, they're like solar panels, just trying to really integrate nature into our energy, into their energy map and stuff. Like I drove this electronic car that got its charge from like every time you push the brake, that charged the car.
Oh yeah.
It was like, fuck my gas car. Like, I want that car. Because you don't have to get as many oil changes. You don't have to get so much stuff.
I think it's interesting because electric cars were basically the first set of cars. Like
Really?
They were around for a while and then they got rid of them.
Oh, yeah. America had the best electronic trolley system in the world.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
gas.
Well, they were wanting to sell cars and stuff like that. So, of course, cars and gas and so it all
that's
goes
so-
hand in hand.
It's so sinister.
But at the same time, that's
capitalism.
just, well, it's how, re-evolve, you know what I mean? Re-evolve to the next step. And we have to, the past is for us to learn from and then grow from and expand upon. If it's something that we don't know, like learn from it and keep going,
So this is a weird question, but when do you think the hubris of humanity will get to a point where we just diagnose ourselves as like the next step on the evolutionary chain? You know what I mean?
What
Like,
do you mean?
like we're no longer, it's the Homo erectus one, right? No, Homo sapien. We're no longer Homo sapien, but we tell ourselves that we're Homo sapien, and that we are evolved people, and we're no longer at the point where we can consider ourselves to be that tiny part of history that was the Homo sapien.
If you look, actually, this is really cool because if you go on the Smithsonian website, they actually have the whole family tree, all the skeletal remains they've found for centuries, and you would think like it's only just Homo sapien, Homo erectus, and then just like a couple of others along the round, right? There's at least 50 to 100 maybe different skeletal remains that they have found, and we're just part of the Homo tree.
Yeah, get it out. I'm just kidding.
That's funny to say.
Homo sapien.
Homo sapien, Homo erectus. But there's several different others within our family tree.
Yeah.
So it's not just cut and dry as Homo sapien, Homo erectus, which is like the main arguments for our evolution. But if you look at their chart on the Smithsonian page, it is so much more in depth. And there's so many years of evolution to what we look like now that, I don't know what we'll look like in the future, but I know we are very much connected to each other through this internet, and technology has become so advanced. There's more things that are tapping more into the mind when it comes to computers.
Yeah, I mean, can you imagine? You know what? I was talking about the singularity. How like a lot of people put a lot of emphasis on like when that moment happens, it'll change everything. But I don't, cognitively, ideas are big or small in my head, right? And the idea of a singularity weighs just about as much as enlightenment in general. And so what the shtick about enlightenment apparently is like, what do you do before you become enlightened? You chop wood and carry water. But what do you do afterwards? You chop wood and carry water. So what if the singularity happens and it's like, oh, you know what I mean?
I don't know. I think like...
it's an interesting one.
I honestly think that if we, as far as like enlightenment goes, we could start there. Like enlightenment for... Let's see how I would write this.
Oh, it's a hard one to talk about.
So, like, enlightenment can be different for each person.
Yeah.
We'll all reach our nirvana in our own way, right?
Yeah. Hopefully.
Yeah. I mean...
if everything goes according to plan.
Yeah. Well, I mean, apparently death is the ultimate nirvana, but, you know what I mean?
Did you listen to the last episode, maybe?
Actually, I only got through half of it.
It goes on, but
you guys get to be
go deep into death.
But enlightenment can be in different things. I mean, I think we have to let go of a lot of our compartmentalized emotions. Like when we have fear of something, we store it and we don't let it go. When we're mad at somebody, we compartmentalize it, but we don't let it go. Instead of just being like, I'm gonna let it go and just kind of move on.
I have to let it go, and I have to say what it is. But this is me. This is me.
You have to, because what it does is, you're just compounding everything. Compound it.
And eventually, when you compress things too much, it distorts it. And that's just a sound wave.
You're just basically you're not giving yourself time to breathe. And I think that's what's feeding into, of course, a lot of the mental...
well, thank you for telling me that. I needed to hear that.
Difficulties, that people are feeling, especially with depression and stuff, because, everybody says, the climate's changing. And for me, I don't listen to a lot of the news. And I don't listen to a lot of what's going on. I mean, I hear it from people who are my friends, of course, that are big into the political stuff. And so it's interesting to see the dynamic from me, who doesn't listen to a lot of that, to somebody who does listen to it every single day. And they get frustrated and they get upset and they feel like there's no tomorrow, basically, that's going to look the same as today. And I was like, well, that's no tomorrow is going to look the same anyway. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you're just getting influenced by these people. Is it going to change how you view the world, or are you going to allow how they view the world to influence how you view the world? You know what I mean? Because they're always, like, the news and all that's always going to put negative thoughts on any group or any person or any place or anything.
It's very seldom good.
Just so, you put people in fear. It's all very subliminal. Like, it's very, like, strategic. There was this documentary I watched about how, actually it was a TED Talks, about how the brain is so easily influenced by just subliminally putting information out there. So, like, if a news broadcaster was like, oh, today's weather is going to be like, and then they'll just continue with another sentence and you'll fill in that blank. So it's basically they have these fragmented sentences that your brain automatically fills in. So if you're for this side or that side, it's like your brain automatically is like, if you're for this particular side and they said, oh, blah, 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 on this side did this thing, and then they didn't say anything else, they didn't give you any other information, but they fragmented all their sentences, your brain starts to automatically fill in the spaces in between.
Yes, absolutely. I dwell on these things, I really do, and it's it's when I'm sitting and trying to not think about anything that I think about what you're talking about, because, and that makes me neurotic, but it becomes and Ram Dass talks about this, how, like, getting out of bed seems to cause you bad karma sometimes, and you kind of just have to, you just do your best not to add to the fire.
There's, I live by this philosophy, and it was actually given to me by this lady that I met a long time ago. She was living out of her car with her son, but she worked really hard. She worked 2 jobs just to be able to spend time with him. She worked jobs specifically to where she could take him to school and pick him up from school and all that stuff. She was a very, very sweet lady. And she gave $2 to this homeless person. And of course, somebody in line behind her mentioned, like, why did you do that? Yeah. Why did you do that? And she's like, it's not about their intentions of what they're going to do with that money. It's about my intentions. I can't control what they do in life. I can only control myself.
That's a story from the Bible.
And so she's very, like, just her saying that, I was like, a switch flipped where I was like, that's very true.
Wow.
Like, anywhere I go, I'm not going to be, like, projecting any, like, thoughts onto anybody else, because honestly, like, I don't know how they grew up or anything, like, if their day was just started off bad, their car broke down, I don't know what happened to them, you know what I mean?
Yes.
And so, especially with people that are homeless, there was a debate that I had at a Krishna temple, mm-hmm. And the debate was about giving money to a homeless person.
Yes.
And they're like, don't give it to them, because if they look like they're a meth addict or something, and they ask you for $100, would you give them that money? Because then they will use that money to go get more meth. And I was like, the first thing was automatically like, that's $100. That seems excessive to ask for. But,
I've never been, yo, give me 100, please.
Yeah, I was like, that's a very brazen guy. But at the same time, I've been around the homeless community. I've helped out in that community. I've lived out of a storage unit before, so I know how difficult, especially when it comes to pride. Once your pride is gone as a homeless person, you don't care. Like, the way that you see the world is a lot different, and so you can't really judge, like, their outer appearance, because some of them have mental disorders that there is no way for them to get treatment because they can't afford the treatment.
Or they've lost identification or don't have
lost
social...
identification.
Yeah.
There's a lot of military that are homeless. And so my answer back was what that lady had told me. Like, there's no telling what their journey was to that point. There's no telling what would happen once you give them that money, because they could be like, well, I'm going to go feed myself and all these other people, but you don't know that.
I had such a weird experience. It was the last time somebody had come up to me and asked for money, but it was at Create Culture, mm-hmm. At Empire, and this one woman had been showing up like every week you know, because I did give her what change I had in my pocket, but and then the second time I really didn't have change in my pocket, so I said, no, I'll give you I'll give you a good day, and have a good day. And then the third time, she came up to me with her hands out, like very, archetypally. She didn't even say anything. She just had the eyes and the hands, and the.
Yeah.
And I said, I don't have anything, because at that point I only had art. Sometimes I try to give them art, and I'm like, sell this, and keep the money. But at this point, I told her I didn't have anything, and so she turned around. But then I looked down on the ground, and like right in front of her, there was $5 on the ground, in just like new ones, and it was like, hey, you want those? It's very interesting. I said, I can give you this, but it's not it's like, here.
It was probably meant for that time. Because, I mean, there's one time we were on a road trip to Florida, and we had found maybe $60 at this motel stop. We stayed overnight at a motel. And on the way, as we kept driving down, we stopped to get some food, and in front of that place was these couple of kids holding up signs, and they were trying to raise money for their church to go to Disneyland, right? And it was just for their tickets, for them to be able to go.
Oh.
And I always think that people are put in your place in front of you for a reason, and especially if you're compelled, if something tells you like, yes, you should probably give that person some money. Like there's something they're telling you that is the right moment, and it may not be for them specifically. It's probably just better for you, morally, mentally, or whatever it may be. But it brings some sort of like, it eases that tension of like, I should give,
Yeah.
and then it's when you don't, it's like I feel like bad that I didn't,
Yes, I've. This sounds strange, but I've struggled with giving too much, because
there is such a thing as that, though.
It creates the vulnerability, right?
You open yourself up more, which is it's a sad thing that you have to shelter yourself with that, because it's like, it takes away that kind gesture, you know what I mean?
Yes.
And it takes away the honesty of that experience, especially when people are really good at taking. And there's some people who are really good at that, and it's unfortunate that there is that mentality out there, but you just have to be mindful.
To combat, consumption is, it used to be a disease. Like, I think it was, if like, I could be totally wrong right now. Feel free to fact check me, but I think that like obesity used to be called consumption. Or no, consumption was like a form of flu, whatever. Anyway, the way people consume things today is really, it's ingrained in like the politics. Like I remember the speech from Ronald Reagan saying that we're closer to unlocking the individual genius within every American citizen based on how they consume and when they consume and how often they can consume. Or, something to that effect. And that was the president of the United States saying, go consume. But I think it really comes down to like such a simple thing. It's like on our birthdays, our whole lives, we're rewarded with gifts, but what if at a certain point you could get to a point where you're giving gifts on your birthday instead of receiving gifts? It might change the archetype or the dichotomy or paradigm of it.
I think it's our, there's several things, because when you feel good, your endorphins kick up, serotonin is like, doing its thing,
yeah,
right?
It's like a party.
Because you're excited for this gift, especially when we're overindulgent. We don't know how to control our indulgence.
And we're in Texas, so.
And we love.
That's like
And
happening.
when you feel those endorphins and kicking up and making you feel good, you want to continuously feel good, because it feels great to feel good, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's that balance of knowing that even your bottom should be something to be happy that you've experienced, because it makes you much stronger than somebody who's never experienced it at all in their lives. And it's kind of you just, I don't know, it grounds you again. if you hold balance to both.
And I forget that. I mean, it's like you're really talking to me personally, and which is ironic because I know we're on a podcast and it's you and I in a conversation, but like what you're saying is just so personal in my life and what I'm experiencing right now around the holiday season, and the reality is how frequently do we forget the experiences that ground us, like really, 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 How often do we just wish we had that fortitude or, power?
I'm not an excitable person when I get gifts. My friends could tell you, they're like...
Is that a challenge?
It's funny because they're like, here's this gift that you really, like, I
that you
want.
want.
And I'm like, oh, thank you. Like, I'm happy to receive them. But it's like, I'm not like... I'm not a giddy, like, oh.
You gave me such gifts today. I was like happy. I guess I have a long way to go.
But I love giving gifts, especially like handmade and thoughtful gifts.
Yeah.
So like I tend to process. I've been told this, that I process people a certain way. Like when I talk with somebody, I absorb all the information from them, but just in this subliminal level, so that way when I start creating something for that specific person, it's like it almost automatically goes to them, But I focus on, like, especially when it comes to other people, to focus on the things that they love.
Yeah.
Because the things that they love, can open doors to something that you might eventually love or look into, or connect you better to that person.
Yes, and that relativity of it all is really what I wanted to focus on in the large spectrum.
Yeah, it's not connecting to like, the things that we have, you know what I mean? And it's like connecting, like last year for Christmas, I painted all these portraits of family members.
Nice.
For their family. So it was like, so for an aunt, I painted her granddaughter, her first granddaughter. So, and grandma, she got, granddad passed away. It's been probably 8 years now.
That's...
Yeah, I think about 8 years now. Actually, yeah, it's been 8 years. It's already past November.
Oh wow, my grandfather passed away.
I painted a portrait of him in his younger days for her, and so like that was like just their expression of love for what they got. You know what I mean? And then something more personal. Like this table could break down and you could replace it with another table.
Unless the table had a portrait of my grandfather on it.
Yeah, exactly. Or if the table was from your grandfather and he made it.
I'm just being a smartass right now.
No, like, because there's pieces. Granddad used to make a lot of wood pieces.
Really?
And so...
That's ironic.
Yeah, he used to make like furniture and stuff. And so that was kind of... Yeah, we have pieces that we'll never get rid of,
My grandfather passed in November as well, and he was an enthusiast for art, and I'm really glad to have had that person in my life. I love grandpas.
I didn't grow up with grandparents, so it's my partner's grandparents are my grandparents, I guess.
Aww.
So, yeah.
That's great. Wow. Good.
Yeah.
I'm happy for that, man. I'm open to it. Like, I
always like admire like people who have like this grandparent experience. It's like I don't regret not growing up with it, but it's like kind of that.
Yeah.
It's nice to have that experience, I guess, because it's something that I didn't have as an experience growing up. We moved around so much that we didn't have that. Like we didn't have family to just drive to like on the holidays. So it's been an interesting experience.
Oh yeah, there's what some people have, other people don't.
Yeah.
I had my grandparents, but was missing a large part of like the other half of my family that would be on my father's side, and so I projected a lot more semblance into my grandparents' relationship. I think that's the right word. There's just a lot more meaning.
More significance.
Yes, that's a much more safe word to use because I don't honestly know what semblance means. It sounds fun to say though. Goodness.
Semblance is like.
Here, we've got smartphones. I turned it off. I'll put the definition right here. Yeah, that's one amazing thing about podcasts.
Wait, I can't believe it. A brain fart.
Dude, brain farts happen all the time.
Yeah.
Actually, like, I have to be on the same mental state. You know, like I can't be drinking and then the other person's not drinking a beer or something like that, or you know, I can't be only on coffee and then they're not caffeinated. Or it's like it doesn't sound as balanced, or you know, there needs to be more levels in there, but that's okay. You know what? I'm really glad we've been talking today. I mean, I think we're about wrapping it up right now, because I know we've gone over, but
It's all good. I know you probably like edit some.
oh, I'll take some stuff out. You know, like any burps or farts. Like I don't want people to have part of me. Can't believe it's
I'm like, I'm pretty sure that now.
There's never been any of those. I'm just a weird guy. I'm I'm just having a weird Christmas season or holiday season.
What's that?
Well, I moved back with my family because they all needed help around the house, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like literally they need someone to help them do the things around their house to help upkeep the house stuff. And it's not easy. You know, we were talking earlier about how if you think you're enlightened, try spending the holidays with your family, you know?
Yeah, well, it's kind of, you know what I mean? I think your family is a good example on how you approach strangers too, because I mean, you can't. there's certain things you can't tell a family member that you can probably tell a stranger, but the way that you're patient with your family member and telling them how, like, your opinion on something, if you're very patient with it, is the same patience that you can show a stranger.
Oh yeah, you're right. And I mean, I consider I mean, it's abstract, but it is my yoga. You know, I don't sit there and be like, well, this cringy moment is my yoga, you know, but it really is, and that's how I work through, I mean, I've been through much more strenuous things, and that's what I tell myself, you know, it's like,
well, I mean,
this
like,
is what
also,
I got.
You know, when you live in a space together with a bunch of people, it kind of like your clash of mentalities are bound to happen. But when you find like a common ground, it usually helps out. You know?
And art actually is that common ground. When we are being creative together and focusing on art, it's like
there's a certain energy to it.
Yeah, and I really want to create like a big family collab. You know, that's like my vision, and to make like. You know, I just feel like we could all learn, but man, collaborating with people is like a whole nother yoga, it seems, but it all boils down to just
it's all about patience when you do collabs, because you know, your time frame of getting something done, like I'm really fast.
Yes.
Like
you paint a lot.
Yeah.
Like daily, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Did you paint today?
Practically every night. I painted till like 4 or 5 this morning.
That counts. So yes.
Yeah.
Okay. You got it.
Yeah, it's a piece that I'm going to be releasing for my solo show next weekend. So,
how do painters get a promotion?
What do you mean?
I don't even really know. I'm kind of like, how do we promote ourselves from painter to painter?
I think that's a great thing that we do. Well, I guess it's all about your skill level. If you feel that your skill set isn't at where you need to be, then yeah, you can work on promoting yourself to the next level. But I think every piece that you create, every painting you create, has a lesson to teach you, whether it's a new technique or a new way to approach life or think about life. Because I do a lot of meditative experiences with my work. So.
Yes, you know what? It shows. It shows. And it is a delight. I thank you so much for your gifts. I'm going to tag your Instagram in the comments of this all over whatever social media I share with Would you like to share the details on your upcoming solo show?
Oh yeah, it's December 8th from 7 to 10 at Freight Gallery inside Just Cost Designs.
In San Antonio?
In San Antonio, Texas.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And do you have any art deals right now for the holiday season?
Oh no, I don't.
Oh no, I don't. I hope I didn't just show you that.
I don't have any art deals during Christmas. I just.
But you do have a really wide range of. You have like price ranges in like every conceivable section of a budget.
Yeah, I mean San Antonio, in that scene, we noticed that it's like really hard for people sometimes to scrape by, but they're very supportive of art. Mm-hmm. And so I want to be able to allow anybody to be able to have art, whether it be like an expensive piece, an original,
wow,
or just something like on a lighter, or that they could take around with them.
And I agree with that. That's why most of my shows I've displayed my art in my solo shows.
Yeah.
I haven't sold my art. I've just sold tickets. So anybody can come see it, and then once they're there, they can, if they are comfortable purchasing it, because a lot of people don't even have walls for art. I tried giving a person who lives in their car art, and he was like, dude, I can't put this anywhere. And I'm like,
it's
what?
Very strange. It's very strange when you I mean, smaller pieces would be easier, or even something on a shirt would be easier for someone living in a car.
Do you paint at the park ever?
Yeah, I have. I'm actually trying to get a meditate and paint session together, probably more in the spring, since the weather's been kind of changed. It changed the terrain in a lot of the parks, and I would want to set one of those up at.
You know what, Jag Wired? San Antonio is lucky to have you. And thank you so much for being a guest on my podcast. I can tell you, pardon the interruption, but I'm gonna listen to this one because it was very personal. Granted, I'm going through the motions of my life, but thank you so much for sharing so open-heartedly with me, and I hope that this has been a wonderful experience for you. It has for me.
Thank you for letting me come and chat with you.
Absolutely. Y'all, I hope we can do this again, and thank you for the art. I'll be sharing it all up there. Have a great day, all right?
Thank you, you too.
Well, there you have it, guys. It's really important that we get art into the hands of everybody. And with that in mind, I'd just like to hopefully inspire people to reveal that everybody has a creativity within them that they can share whenever it's fitting. Thank you so much, Miss Jag Wired, for coming on board. Throughout the podcast, I say that it's mine, but I really mean the podcast. I think it's ours, and I'm trying to correct my language so that it feels more like a community utility. I thank the gallery, Lucid, so much for helping me create the platform of the Taproom podcast. That kind of cooperation is really a blessing today, and everybody I've seen in that gallery is just such a blessing and a positive light into my situation. Thank you to the listeners, and I pray a big blessing over anybody listening. And I hope that this episode can inspire everybody to go and create some art somehow and find a way to get the creative juices flowing. See y'all later. Thank you.